And we are now back, Columbus community, from our executive session. And I want to welcome back all of the board members. I forgot to mention that, again, we are doing a hybrid meeting today. So we do have board members in a room down at 3700 on South High Street. And we are practicing. So I have new friends with me this evening. So Board Member Cole, Board Member Brown, and Board Member Beckerly are joining Dr. Dixon and I. And then those that were here last time are at home on Zoom. So that's why some of us have masks on, and you can tell that some of us are in the room, and you can see our camera of the room layout. So that's why this looks a little different tonight. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump back into our agenda. We are now at item 3 to review the agenda for this evening. We already had our executive session. We do not have any public comment this evening. You will have a report from the superintendent. No report from the auditor is expected. We have a report from the treasurer. We have 2 items in board matters, and we have our consent agenda followed by board announcements and then adjournment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about the agenda? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Cole?
I'm here. Yes.
Dr. Pierce? I heard Carol's, Ms. Beckerly's vote faintly through somebody else's microphone. Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
And Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
And President Adair?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you so much. Okay, we do not have any public comment this evening, so we are going to go ahead and move down to item 6, which is the report of the superintendent. Madam Superintendent, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Board President Adair. Tonight, as we align our work with the Ohio Department of Education's Whole Child Strategic Plan, we recognize and embrace the importance of social emotional learning competencies into our core instruction. We have adopted the KSEL's 5 SEL's core competencies referred to in the Whole Child Strategic Plan. These competencies are social awareness, self-awareness, self-management, relationship building, responsible and caring decision-making. Research also confirms social emotional learning competencies that are taught, modeled, and practiced can lead to a positive student outcomes that are important for success in school and life. These outcomes include improvement in skills, attitudes, relationships, and academic performance. Supporting us in this work would be the Panorama Education. Panorama Education works with 900 school districts, 11,500 schools in 48 states, providing SEL parent and staff surveys in an effort to help educators improve student outcomes through measurement at the district, classroom, and individual student level. So tonight I have with us our Director of Social Emotional and Student Support Services, Cheryl Ward, and Jillian Evans, Account Director from the Panorama, to present our district's data to you tonight. So I turn it over to Mrs. Ward.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Dixon. I am sharing my screen at this point. If someone could nod to me to make sure that you all can see it. So we have certainly embarked on a journey with social emotional learning competencies, and we have identified a partner in this work with us with Panorama. On the call, as Dr. Dixon mentioned, is Jillian, who has been a partner in this process. This evening, what we're going to talk about is kind of the why of social emotional learning in Panorama. We're going to give you some high-level overviews of the insights taken from our well-being and back to school survey, and then we're going to walk through next steps. On the screen, you will see several school districts that Panorama has worked with across the country. I will make special note that in our neighboring districts, we have Dublin, Westerville, Hilliard, Pickerington, Olentangy, and Worthington schools that Panorama also supports and works with. As we take a look at social emotional learning, it was important for us to take a look at social emotional learning as it relates to school climate and culture, and a program and a platform that aligns with our current multi-tiered systems of supports. This process is what we use in our district to be able to identify early warning systems and challenges that young people may be going through academically and social emotionally, and then providing tiered supports along the way. As we begin to look at our state and district alignment, it was also important in looking at a partner that was aligned with the work that the state was doing in our Ohio Department of Education. So with Panorama, there are 3 call-outs that are in the whole child framework: social emotional learning, school climate and culture, and family engagement. Our 4 strategic priorities. 1, academic performance. With this work, we will understand the social emotional learning skills that are paramount to success in the classroom. We will also take a look at measuring key climate indicators to create a safe, social, and positive learning environment. As we look at our talent management priority, we will hear feedback from CCS educators to support productive and professional conversations between teachers, staff, and school leaders. We will also take a look and promote our healthy family-school relationships and engage our stakeholders in the community. So the fall survey. When we began this work with Panorama, our initial thought was to have only the social emotional learning surveys. When COVID came and we were taking a look at how we were returning, and there were many questions and decisions that had to be made, one of the things that became very clear on the national level was trying to get an idea of where students were. And so a back to school well-being survey, there was a decision that was made to add this into the survey timeline. So the information we're going to talk about this evening is the back to school well-being survey. We will also begin to look at our SEL survey. This date has been pushed back slightly because of the well-being survey. We're actually going to begin the social emotional learning survey in January. You will also see that underneath the winter column, we're going to be administering our teacher and our staff surveys, as well as our family and school relationship survey. In the spring timeline, you will also see another administration of the social emotional learning survey, as well as a climate and culture survey that deals with equity and inclusion. So our well-being back to school survey. As we begin, one of the things we wanted to pull out was some very high level insights. This gives a glimpse into the type of data and survey information that was captured, as well as the potential of how we can begin to use this data to have very rich conversation. In the Wellbeing Back to School survey, you will see on the screen the topics that were surveyed. You will also see on the screen the languages that were made available, the grade bands that were provided the survey, as well as the survey window. Insight number 1. Elementary students across the district reported more favorably than secondary students about the relationships that they have in and out of school. I'm going to pause and ask Jillian to come in just for a second to be able to explain the highlighted pieces.
Hello, yes. So our percentages are the percent of students who responded favorably to a set of questions aligned to that topic. So what we see here is that 61% of students in grades 3 through 5 responded with a favorable answer choice when answering questions about the relationships, both in school and out of school, whereas about 81% of students in grades 3 through 5 responded favorably about their supportive relationships in and out of school.
Thank you, Jillian. Insight number 2. Compared to their peers, students with language learning and special education status reported that they need more support to be academically successful right now. Insight number 3. Students in higher grades reported that they learn about, discuss, confront issues of race, ethnicity, and culture in school more than students in lower grades. Insight number 4. On average, about 1 out of every 2 students in grades 3 through 12 reported returning to school this fall experiencing challenging feelings: mad, lonely, sad, frustrated, and or worried. Students who identified as female reported experiencing these feelings at a higher rate than students who identified as male. Insight number 5. Ninth graders, new high school students, report the lowest in having an adult in the school they can count on. Insight number 6. On average, 60% of students in grades 6 to 12 reported feeling sometimes, frequently, or almost always angry in the week prior. On average, 75% of students in grades 3 through 5 and 89% of students in grades 6 through 12 have access to the technology they need to complete schoolwork online. Insight number 7. Zoom is polarizing for students in grades 6 through 12. Many students name Zoom as the top thing going well, and others name Zoom as the top thing they'd like to see changed. Within Panorama, they have the ability to create a word cloud so that we can bubble up and see those words that were more frequently identified within our surveys. And so you see this as an example of another way that we can pull data out of the system of Panorama. Insight number 8. Students in grades 3 through 5 report that members of their family make them feel the happiest right now. Those were a few insights pulled out at a district level in ways that we can begin to make sense of some of the data that we're seeing. What's on your screen right now is the Panorama tour. This is the home screen when individuals sign into Panorama that we see. We've worked with Panorama to customize this to our district. So Columbus City represents the district level. We can then individualize with our 16 schools. The school buildings can go in themselves. Course selections are those courses. Students, of course, self-explanatory. We've also asked Panorama to divide it into our 6 regions, as well as to be able to look at data elementary, middle, and high. So our next steps. As we take a look at strengthening our multi-tiered systems of support frameworks with our SEL data, we are able to identify and approach young people who need targeted interventions as it relates to academics, behaviors, our attendance, and now our social emotional learning data. So even though we're at the beginning stages of this process, we want to begin to take a look at some recommended steps through our tiered supports. So tier 1, bringing together the school teams to discuss the data at the aggregate level. Where are the common themes across all students, and what interventions do we need to put in place to address those needs? Tier 2, across departments, analyzing the data to surface differences and experiences among students. What additional support systems do we need to put in place to help groups of students? How will we hold ourselves accountable as adults to address these inequities? Tier 3, build student intervention teams. Continue to build on the teams that we have existing within our district and be able to look at the data at a student level. How can we take a student's assets to further push their development? And if a student is showing a need for support, where are those steps? And what are the timelines and the accountability things that we can put in play? Within the playbook, or within Panorama, there's a playbook. And so the first portion is being able to have data, being able to look at the data, understanding the data. The second part is the availability for teachers and staff to be able to go to what we call a playbook. These are vetted organizations that have actual lesson plans on social emotional learning. And on the screen are a few examples of them. What you see in front of you now is an example. If you were to go and hit on the playbook, the topic is meaningful online messaging. And I know it's a little small, but the essence of this lesson says, write a simple sentence where students can see it. Then read the sentence using different tones of voice. For example, write, what was great, or that was great, I'm sorry. And read it with the following tones of voice: a neutral tone, an excited tone, a sarcastic tone, an uncertain tone. And then it begins to walk you through and help students begin to walk through what that looks like. And sometimes how emails or information and language, because of the way it's presented, gets misrepresented and understood. So as we take a look at what does this mean, further training and data collection. CCS in the month of December, we are going to focus on our data inquiry and our action steps, sitting with the data, understanding the data, figuring the data out. We're going to offer opportunities for professional development so that our staff, our administrators, our senior leadership have an understanding of what they're looking at and begin on how to apply it. Panorama will also offer continued professional development throughout the year to ensure that we have an understanding of how we can use and understand the data. As I close, there are a few pullouts from our neighboring districts. There was a question around kind of how do districts begin to use this data? What does it look like? So for Hilliard, one of the things that they took a look at was their strategy of developing a program to build growth mindset. For that particular district, growth mindset and students and family was an important action step for them to take. And so their Panorama data has yielded a particular strategy for them. As it relates to Worthington wanted to incorporate the topic of sense of belonging and student-teacher relationships. And so their focus as a district was to be able to take a look at those two topics. As we close out this particular presentation, I wanted, first of all, to thank Panorama, Jillian, and all of the team there for their support. I am appreciative of the district and the board for their commitment and embracing the social emotional learning needs of our students. And with that, I will end the presentation and allow any time for questions.
No, I couldn't unmute. Thank you so much for that presentation. We do have some board questions. We will start with Dr. Pierce, and then we will head to Board Member Beckerly.
Thank you so much for this presentation. And I want to, I just think it's interesting that you pointed out Hilliard as one of our peer benchmarking districts. And I say that because I recently saw a message from a Hilliard administrator in essence, telling the teachers that you're not going to get through your normal pacing guide. You're not going to get through everything. It's okay to slow down and respond to the needs of our students. Our students are showing a need for social emotional lesson planning, for response to anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide. And so I appreciate that you reached out to Hilliard. But as you said that, I thought about, again, that video that I recently watched. So in response to that, what approach or what response did our district take once you received this data? Was there a moment of clarity in which we reached out to teachers and made a similar response to them that, hey, it's okay to slow down, to listen to what our students need?
So we're still in the process of sitting and looking with the data. So one of the things that we did was when we rolled out the data, we rolled out the data to our support staff first so that they could begin to take a look, and if there were any identified issues and challenges that needed to get ahead of the game, so they had an opportunity to do that. The data then, teachers November 6th were able to sit with their data and look at the platform. And so right now is where individuals are sitting and having conversations about what does this mean? So the action step of where are we now and where are we going, we're still in, Dr. Pierce, and trying to make some sense about what this is going, where this is going to go. We also provided an executive summary of some highlights, similar to what I just shared with you, of some pullouts, so that we can begin to craft what does this look like for us and how do we begin to support.
So I appreciate that response. I would definitely love us to be more proactive, to be urgent in our response in terms of responding to what we know students are dealing with right now. You pointed to that polarization that students have indicated in terms of Zoom. Some students really like it. Some students want to see some change. So I would hate for us to be in a position where we're waiting to analyze the data when we know a response is needed, in terms of, again, giving our students and our teachers the freedom, the okay, the reassurance that they can slow down a little bit. My next questions then come from the executive report. So on page 3, you give survey methodology. Could you just share what is the total in for students in grades 3 through 12?
Of those who took the survey?
Mm-hmm.
So the way the numbers are broken down, there is the back to school portion of the survey, and that's broken down grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 12. And then there is the well-being section of the survey that's also broken down in grades 3 through 5 and K through 12. So in the back to school survey, grades 3 through 5, there were 5,111 individuals who took the survey. In 6 through 12, 8,250 individuals who took the survey. For the well-being portion, 3 through 5, 5,739 individuals who took the survey. And then grades 6 through 12, 9,037 individuals who took the survey.
So on page 3, it says there was a total of 14.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It says there was a total of 14,776 students that took the survey. What's the total in? What's our total population of students in grades 3 through 12 for the entire district?
That information I do not have currently. We captured the individuals who actually took the survey. But we can get that for you to make the comparison. That's fine.
Because I want to get at what percentage of our students actually took the survey. I think it would be good for our watching public and our communities to know that. Then I want to flip to page 5. There's an interesting summary that's shared on that page. First, it says that students with designated language learner status responded on average 5 percentage points less favorable than their peers when it came to having academic supports that they needed for success right now. How are we going to respond again immediately to that as a district? I understand at the school level, teachers are sitting with this data, But from an administrative level, are we thinking about some things that we can standardize, operationalize from a district standpoint to respond to that? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. A part of the work that we're doing is taking a look at these pull-out insights and beginning to be able to take them one by one and say what is happening and what are the action steps. I don't have those immediate action steps, but certainly we'll be working with the building administrators and senior leaderships to begin to develop those.
So as we're looking at that action step, I want to point to, again, a unique area that we saw that happen was with our special education students. Again, they're indicating that they're not getting the academic supports that they need. So I want to identify those two student subgroups, our language learners, our special education students. And I want us to take a district approach to getting them the academic resources, services, and supports that they need to be successful right now. Then my next question, and I want to say this is, my next question goes to page 6, where you give a highlight overview. And specifically, I'm curious to know why our 3rd through 5th graders were not asked questions about cultural awareness and action. Research shows us that cultural awareness and action should be happening on day 1 as early as pre-K. The summary that you gave highlights that question, that topic, was only given to our students in grades 6 through 12. Can you please explain why that was omitted?
So Dr. Pierce, let me clarify that the summary that you have was pulled together from the data from Panorama. So not necessarily my work, but I'm going to yield to Jillian because there was a conversation around that particular topic.
So Panorama's items are tested for reliability and validity. Our cultural awareness and action topic is new. As of last year, we developed it in partnership with the RIDES Institute. And at that point in time, we had only tested it in the secondary students, but we are in the process in creating elementary level items for cultural awareness and action. And those will be available, we're hoping, this year.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And then my last question relates to page 10, the appendix, where you give the breakdown of, I want to say, our student subgroups. And you all will probably have to get this information to me at a later date. But my specific question is, how did the demographics correlate with our actual student populations? So I see the breakdown of how many of that 14,000 plus students took the survey. How many of those students are African American? How many of those students have special education status? But I want to deeper dive into that data to understand what percentages of each of those student subgroups were actually represented in the survey.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pierce. We'll turn it over to Board Member Beckerly.
Who continues to have mute and unmute problems. This is really exciting. The power of this tool and our ability to really pinpoint our students' needs. And I would imagine you're excited about it too, and your team.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. The only real, I guess I'm assuming that this is our first run of this. And so it's mostly for you to start refining and thinking about it. So I'm sure there's lots of things that you have in terms of different ways to do and what you would tweak and so on. So I think I'm a little less interested in talking about all of that. But what I did notice was that it looked like from the slides you had up for Hilliard and I guess it was Worthington maybe, that they have sort of district-wide goals for some of these things. And I'm thinking about, I'm putting my strategic plan hat on about, you know, our capacity to, would have to look hard at this instrument and figure out what it is capable of and how, which of the surveys would really get at what the community was telling us our strategic goals should be around social emotional learning, restorative justice practice, trauma. But I'm wondering if there's a way to have a composite, is that the right word? An overall district score, say, and then a score per maybe region or a score per school. Like, does it work that way?
I'm gonna yield that conversation answer to Jillian.
Sure.
We do work with some districts to develop an overall composite score. We do find that those can be less actionable. However, if it's to help measure against a district metric, we're happy to work with Cheryl and set that up.
But I mean, is it useful to say, all right, so the whole district, or maybe I think it's a 5-point scale. So maybe if you average out all the district on some parameter, we're at 3. And so that would be the baseline. And then region 1 is at 4 and region 2 is at 2 and region, you know, and then we can set goals. By the end of 5 years, you'll be there, you know, you'd be higher. Is that the way other districts are using this data, or is that just, it doesn't lend itself to that?
Well, let me jump in, and then Jillian, I can give the floor back to you. I actually had the opportunity. I've reached out to all of our neighboring districts to kind of ask that question. One of the things that I found that was profound from the two that I've actually had a chance to speak with, Dublin and Westerville, is that they very much took a paced approach. So for example, Dublin spent the first year, just their focus was, can we get everybody to take the survey? Right? Can we make sure that we have the numbers in play and taken? There were not strong actionable items in that year 1 and 2 for them, because for them, a part of the goal was to, how do we get the representation needed within the survey? So from an actionable standpoint, they did have actionable goals. They just, from that particular district, said, you know what, it's really important to understand what our perspectives are from our students, not necessarily what we're going to have our staff execute and do. Now they moved into that, right? So I think this is year maybe 3 for them. And so they've moved into that, and they're using that. And they actually have their principals take one of the areas on the survey that was maybe not as favorable as they liked, and added that into their own evaluation process or their own goal setting for the year at a building level. Westerville kind of took a slower process with community and recognizing what the content areas were for the social emotional learning. What do we think our students need to focus on? And then they began to tweak in that manner. So I do think it's important to recognize and understand there's a lot of data here. There's a lot of subgroups here. And as the board and as you all take a look at where are we going, and part of the strategic planning that you all are in the process through of, and what does this mean, and what are the perceptions, and what does that look like, and how do we begin to see what that looks like within the several administrations? Remember that this one is different. This is not a social emotional learning. This was a well-being and back to school.
Right.
Because nationally, there were a lot of information saying that school districts needed to check on our students in that process, and then begin to see, to Dr. Pierce's point, what is it saying about technology? What is it saying about some of our particular populations? What does that look like? And how then can we begin to make some decisions about what we may need to do? So that was the essence of the survey information that we were just given. I don't know if Jillian has anything else to add. I just wanted to make sure that that kind of landscape was laid out for you for a couple of the school districts that I had the opportunity to talk with.
Thanks so much. That's great.
Thank you so much. I do not believe there are any additional questions, but let me just look around the room again and check chat. No. Okay. So thank you so much for that presentation. And I will turn it back to the superintendent for anything else with your report.
Okay, thank you, Board President Adair. Again, board members, thank you for your question, but always remember, when we send you these data points, we send them to you in a timely fashion. So if you have any questions or concerns, please send those to my attention so I can give those to the staff so we can answer those for you. We don't like to come back to you if we have those questions in advance. So that's why we gave you the report early. And we would continue to give those reports to you early so you can have an opportunity to look at them, read them, and get us those questions. At this time, that ends my report for tonight, and I will yield back to you, President Adair.
Thank you so much. We will move now into the report from the internal auditor, which we don't actually have one, but it'd be nice to say hi to you, Auditor Smith. How are you today?
Thank you, President Adair. I am doing well, and hopefully all of you are doing well. It's nice to see our South High Street location in tonight. So hopefully I'll be able to join you out there soon. But thank you. I do not have a report.
Thank you so much. Do either of the co-chairs for the Audit and Accountability Committee have anything they'd like to add right now? Shaking heads of no. So I will move on then to item 8, the report from the Treasurer's Office. Hello, Mr. Treasurer. How are you this evening?
Super duper, doing fine. Thank you very much. What I have for you this evening is the monthly financial report for October, which was reviewed last Wednesday by the Finance Committee. Through the end of October, revenues continue to run above plan and expenditures below plan, resulting in about a $31 million improvement in cash balance versus the plan. I will mention to you that what we've done for this month, since we have adopted the November 5-year forecast, is we have inserted the November 5-year forecast as now our annual plan. And that's what we're making comparisons to now. So these variances are really a good guide to how we're doing against that 5-year forecast now. Through October, our property taxes, although there was no activity this month, they are now showing as 5.9 million above plan versus last month, which was about 9.4 million above plan. And that's simply because the benchmark moved. The plan increased about 8 million for the year to 532 million from about 424 million in the May forecast, which was the previous benchmark. So as you look month to month, when you compare September to October, sometimes the year-to-date variance changes might not be supported by a month-to-date change for October. And again, that's simply because we revised the plan and that benchmark may have moved up or down depending upon what was included in the November forecast. State funding now running about 1.9 million under plan. I'm going to have a couple graphs right after this to show you some of the behavior. History tells us that state funding comes in somewhat erratically because of changes as data becomes current and what was a formula would calculate a different amount. Since we don't really have a formula anymore, you'll see that this tracks more like just 12 equal payments, but I'll show you that in a second. Other revenue still running ahead of plan, mainly due to pilot payments in lieu of taxes at about 6.7 million above plan. So here's a look at state aid. The orange line here, the erratic line, is what history would tell us would be our month-to-month flow in state aid. The blue line is 1/12 each month of the total amount expected, and you can see the black line there better tracks that equal monthly payment. So when you look at variances, while I just told you that year to date we were about 1.8 million under plan right here, you can see that really, if we look at it, if it's really going to be just an even flow, 1/12 each month, there is really no variance. We're right on plan. So we'll track this with the committee each month, and I'll probably show them this comparison so that we can just keep an eye on those variances. Graphically here, property taxes a little bit above plan, state aid a little under, and you can see other revenues when I break it down that all other revenues, which is where the pilot payments are, stand out as a variance. A reminder, last month I added this heat map. You can see our variances are categorized from very favorable to very unfavorable. You can see here too the revenue, the categorization of revenue variances is exactly opposite that of expenditures. That is, if you're very much under plan on revenues, that's unfavorable for revenues, but under plan on expenditures will be considered favorable. So looking at that on revenues, year to date, you can see that we're either on plan or favorable in all but 2 categories, which state aid's just moderately unfavorable, and all the financing sources unfavorable. Moving on to expenditures, again, just a reminder that the November 5-year forecast is the plan. Personnel stands at 12.2 million under plan. And that, when I break that down into benefits and salaries and wages, benefits are right spot on plan at about 240,000 over plan on 59 million in expenditures. So the bulk of that, almost the entire amount of that 12.2 million is in salaries and wages. And that's spread amongst many categories. So it's kind of evenly spread among regular wages, substitutes, overtime, things like that. So no one particular line in the detail stands out, but we are running under plan on personnel. Purchase services continue to run under plan, year to date 10.8 million. Charter, STEM, and scholarship are now running under plan as that forecast jumped about $10 million from May to November. So you can see since we, when you raise that bar of expecting more expenditures against a pretty static number for current expenditures, that increases that under plan variance. We were not under plan in prior months to this degree. Supplies, believe it or not, even though that the plan did increase on supplies, we are spot on plan with supplies and materials on a year-to-date basis. And capital outlay is running about 4.5 million above plan. Year-to-date this month, it was about 6.9 million last month above plan, but the plan did jump about 7.6 million to 12.8 million from 5.2 back in May. And other objects are running on plan. And graphically here, you see that personnel slightly under plan, charter, and blowing up, expanding out for other objects. You'll see that purchase services are the largest contributor to that under plan variance. You see here mainly, especially in the year-to-date column, mainly green variances, quite a bit is on plan. And obviously since 66% of our expenditure in personnel, a very favorable variance in personnel will drive the total expenditures to very favorable, as well as when you add in non-operating expenditures. So through October, revenues are up, expenditures are down, and the cash balance is running ahead of what we would have anticipated in the November forecast, which is all of that is good news. So at the committee, we also discussed some of the appropriation changes that are before the board tonight. And I believe we had a record meeting. Board chair may want to speak to that, or the committee chair may want to speak to that. But I think we had a record meeting of about 37 minutes. So it was short and sweet, so to speak. That concludes my report for the financial report for October.
Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to the co-chairs. I believe Board Member Cole has a comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I did not want to share that we had a 37-minute meeting. But for those who are watching the wonderful presentation, by the way, and saw the bottom of it, it was not October 2021. That's just our treasurer always seeing so far into the future. He's just thinking ahead. But I just wanted to make sure folks who saw the piece understood it is for October 2020. But you're doing a great job. Thank you, as always. You're fine.
That search and replace feature sometimes is your worst enemy. I'll have to go back and fix that. That does say 2021. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
Thank you. Board Member Brown has a question or a comment.
Yes, very briefly. I just want to commend Stan. Every month, it seems that you get better with the presentations. You add in little features that really help make this understandable, more easily understandable to anyone looking at it, the color coding, the charts, the heat map. And I really appreciate that. And I think others do as well. And I also wanted to commend you on your efficiency with the last meeting. That's a great example. Let's continue.
Okay, thank you. You know, since Board Member Cole discovered that little faux pas of the year in there, perhaps I'll embed a little error some way and we can play a little Where's Waldo in the financial report to find that error.
Well, that will certainly make people pay attention.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the opportunity to do the report this evening.
Thank you so much. All right, we will go ahead and move into board matters. Our first item is to discuss the Safe School Working Group recommendation summary. The group submitted to the board today, and it is on board docs. As everyone knows, the Safe Schools Working Group was seated back in June. We had a process in place where we had community applications, and they were to address the question of what makes a safe school for our students, the community, and our staff for our CCS buildings. We incorporated, as we moved through the process, we realized that we needed to incorporate more opportunity for a community voice. And so we worked with Battelle for Kids to add some additional community sessions prior to the board, prior to the group sitting to discuss. And then that group had 2 meetings, and through that process, realized that maybe the way that this was set up was not 100% conducive to where we were going. And we really needed to take a step back and think about how we were getting there in a way that not only allowed for space for everyone to be heard, to be recognized, to feel safe in the conversation, but really about taking answering the question in a way that was most beneficial to the entire district. So I want to thank the members of that working group who came, who sat, who worked, who talked, who shared, who were vulnerable, who did it all, and worked through that process. And I want to thank the volunteer chairs who sat and led that effort in Kim Mason and Charlita Tavares. So I want to thank everyone for their work and the work we still have to do. The group itself had a lot of amazing individuals from our students all the way up through parents and community to professionals that work in the space around juvenile justice. And so I think we have the right people around the table. We just, have to kind of regroup around how to really get to the question. So I do want to read the recommendations that the committee or the working group has put forward about what are our future steps for this work. And then the board, we will have a discussion about what we think, what our next steps will be and how we can continue this very important work going forward. So the 3 recommendations that the working group have put forward are: 1, to regroup and restructure a working group to reflect a more structured long-term process that is part of the board's ongoing work structure. 2, have the reform group review the ideas and suggestions, data, articles, and policies collected from the first working group as a guide and discussion tool. 3, task the reform group to create a comprehensive safe schools model that will work for all stakeholders, students, staff, community, and partners as part of the Columbus City School District. So those are the 3 recommendations that are put forth. And at this point in time, I would like to go ahead and open the floor to my fellow board members to discuss ideas about next steps and how we will move this very critical and important work forward as a board and as a district, knowing that at this moment in time, we are still not yet ready to create actual recommendations to put forward in our strategic plan, which is fine. We learned a lot in this process. We got a lot more data, and we know now that we need to create a different space to ensure all voices are heard. So this is the time to have this discussion. And at the end of the discussion, we will put forth our next steps as a board and how to create this very critical work to ensure that our buildings are safe, both physically and emotionally for our students, staff, and community, so that we really can meet our true vision of our portrait of a graduate to go forward. So I think, I can't tell because there says 2, I have a comment. So I think, I don't know, Board Member Cole, did you want to go first? Yes, Board Member Cole.
All right, thank you, Madam President. My initial thought is this, is that first and foremost, I thank the work of the committee. I think that this merits a workshop kind of conversation amongst us as board members to take the data that we've gotten and then come up with a definitive plan, agenda, platform that seeks to develop or establish a relationship moving forward, or not to, but definitely in my mind, moving forward with our Columbus Police Department in a way that holds them accountable to community policing, opens the door of opportunity for community engagement in our buildings and outside of our 4 walls, in our communities, our neighborhoods. I see a tremendous opportunity here for us to reimagine public safety in our role as a major pillar in the city of Columbus and in this community as a whole. For me, it's super important that in that reimagination process, we develop an ask and an agenda that looks at the police department and says, hey, you guys historically have created gang units, you've created narcotics units, so many of these things that even I grew up seeing and experiencing in some way or another. What about a unit that's based on neighborhood safety or school safety? What about a unit that has trained professionals who not only understand and do law enforcement? We don't take away what the police do, but we can rethink how they actually apply that, particularly in our school buildings. I think for us to not reimagine our relationship in that way would be irresponsible, and it would be a missed opportunity. It would really just be a missed opportunity altogether. So again, to close, I really like to see us move forward, pushing an agenda that talks about how to reimagine public safety on the behalf of our students, our staff, and the communities that surround our schools. How do we rethink that, reimagine that? And for me personally, I would love to see us develop a City of Columbus school safety police unit or division that works directly with us in ensuring safety and community, real community policing and engagement in our neighborhoods.
Thank you so much, Board Member Cole. Up next is Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much, Board President Adair. So as we continue, can you guys hear me? So as we continue to address this issue, one, I want to start off by thanking not just the individuals that served on the working group, but the individuals that have wrote emails, the individuals that showed up at board members' houses, the individuals that convened conversations in their homes, on the sidewalk, in grocery stores to talk about safety in our schools. Our board president started the process off by saying it was more than just about police. It was about creating a safe school environment for our students, for our staff. And so I want to thank our entire community for leaning in to have that conversation. As we continue along the agenda to come up with actionable items that are sustainable, I encourage us, I would love for my colleagues to join in efforts that have us working collaboratively and in partnership with the City of Columbus, with our Franklin County commissioners, with other governmental institutions throughout not just neighborhoods and schools that surround our schools, but throughout the Central Ohio region. We know that our students don't experience trauma related to police officers in a vacuum. It does not just occur in our schools. It occurs in their neighborhoods. It occurs on their street. It occurs when they go outside of their normal neighborhoods and into suburban neighborhoods. It occurs throughout the Central Ohio region. And I would like us to continue to advance a conversation that really gets at the layers of inequities that we see when it comes to community policing. This is a larger conversation. I thank our board president again for framing it in such a way that it was about the safety of our schools. And as we continue to do that work, again, I hope that we will in earnest be collaborative and work in partnership with other governmental entities, institutions, be it from Franklin County, our Franklin County commissioners to Job and Family Services to think about, again, the safety of our communities and what we want in terms of not policing, but guaranteeing safety in our communities and schools.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. Up next is Board Member Beckerly.
There, I am so sorry. I really am challenged. Yeah, I agree with Dr. Pierce, and I agree with, I also am grateful for the board president having set or established that the conversation should be more broadly safety. And I think that we need to, from looking at the comments that we did receive as part of the recommendations from the individual members of the working group and the discussions, it seems kind of two overarching things are clear to me. One is that safety is multi-layered and there's a lot of foundational stuff we need to do to create safe environments that are well outside of policing, although maybe, policing could have a role in terms of, if they're working on restorative justice and trauma and that sort of things along with us in the buildings. But those are the things that are foundational to creating safe environments. And that came up a lot in the recommendations. The other thing that I think was clear is that whatever we do, we need to make sure we have some sort of an ongoing permanent mechanism, oversight board, maybe another standing committee underneath the board that is overseeing the work and making sure that it is accomplished and implemented with fidelity. I almost envision it as a school climate and safety sort of almost a broader committee or something along those lines that would be tasked with perhaps both deciding what it is we want and then overseeing it, or maybe there's another preliminary process where the board meets, I think maybe a working group or whatever, a session rather. But once we need a process to establish how we want to define it, and then we have to make sure we have a oversight in place to make sure we actually implement it and carry it through. And that becomes a oversight and also responsibility to making sure we fund it and provide the resources and are creative in making sure that we provide the district, the administration, the schools with what they need in order to accomplish the programs and the processes that are necessary to establish safety in its broadest sense. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Now to Board Member Brown.
Thank you. I agree with nearly everything that's been said so far by my colleagues. In particular, I think, Jen, you led this off just right. We do have some hard work to do, and the board alone needs to get into it and address that. The question never was and cannot be as simple as yes or no, Columbus Police. It's simply not. We have an opportunity to define the relationship with Columbus Police. We have an opportunity to shape specifically what role we want them to play and how they can help us keep our children and our staff safe, and to figure out what we don't want them to do. And I think that would be it'd be irresponsible of us not to work with Columbus Police and its officers to fashion that in a way that addresses our need and our responsibility to protect all of our students and staff. Like others, I wish that some of this would have happened more quickly. But at the same time, we've gotten some really good information along the way. And we have a lot of information now that will be very helpful as we shape this. I think that the other folks that need to be involved in this, we still have to provide opportunities for that, and we should. I want to commend Chris Ward and his staff for providing outstanding safety and security in their role. But we can do this. I think a work session or something like that needs to happen fairly quickly. And I think that, I just this afternoon at lunchtime, I attended a meeting of the Central Ohio Labor and Employment Group. And who was speaking but Jason Pappas, the former FOP president, and Zach Klein, the current city prosecutor. And the topic was the future of policing in Columbus. And it was a very enlightening conversation. It was very respectful on both sides. And they provided a lot of ideas that we can talk about going forward. But I do hear that's what's being said by both sides is respectful and in good faith. And we just need to get involved and work on it. So we've got a great opportunity now, and we can do a substantial amount of this work before we ever have students returning to buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Brown. Board Member Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple of questions. The first says to regroup and restructure a working group to reflect a more structured long-term process that is part of the board's ongoing work structure. Is this to imply that there will be a new working group altogether?
I don't think that that is what the group was implying. I think it was more about they thought that in order for the board to really accomplish what we were kind of asking that group, that it needed to become more of a permanent structure within the board business. And so however we sought to do that, I believe that's what that recommendation was. So I know a couple of times, a couple colleagues mentioned a committee, and we know we have public members sit on committees and things like that. Or it could be some other type of structure that we would want to use. But I believe that that was what that recommendation was aimed at.
Okay, so the second recommendation says have the reformed group review the ideas and suggestions, data, articles, and policies collected from the first working group as a guide and discussion tool. And so recommendation number is that there was a first working group and that this one would be a second working group. So how do we register suggestion number 2 with your response to question number 1 from me?
Well, I mean, I think that that's just kind of semantics. I feel like this group, you know, they were scheduled for 3 meetings, which were 2 meetings held, 1 was canceled, and then they were to provide a report. And so that's what they have done. So I think it's just semantics. In their mind, you know, the work of this group is concluded by them submitting this paper to us. Now, how we want to talk about it, you know, and how we would like to re-engage them or any of, you know, however, I think that's really what this is getting to. It's an acknowledgement that the group actually put in a lot of effort, even though maybe sometimes the conversation didn't lead there. They had collectively gathered a lot of data, a lot of articles, a lot of information that was just never really had that deep dive that we're talking about right now. And so I really think that that's really what they're saying, don't throw away the work that we've done. We've done a lot of work. So let's keep that going and use what we've done as a base to start to add and answer questions. I really think that's what that recommendation is getting at.
Okay, so then clearly we're not creating another working group. We will still be in our process moving forward, utilizing the first group that we set to begin this process.
I think that's what we're talking about. We get to decide now what we want to do with the process going forward. And so far, what I've heard from colleagues is that we need a deeper working session and potentially figuring out how we make this a long-term strategy, which could be utilizing people from that group, creating a committee or something else that we have not discussed yet today.
A part of my concern with that really centers on respect for the young people who came home and protested, and how we are treating them through this process. For me, I was probably more outspoken than many of my colleagues regarding my desire to see our relationship with our school resource officers continue. I gave that answer to them when they first approached me about it. That is still my answer today. However, I feel as any type of reform looks as if we are attempting to divert the voices of those that have been driving this process for us to begin with. And that's a problem for me, because whereas I do not necessarily agree with the desired end result of the students who are pushing this narrative of getting cops out of our schools, I do feel as if we should be upfront with them and treat them with the respect that they deserve in continuing to get to the answer. I think our process might have lended itself to them having a belief that their end result would be achieved. And I'm not so certain that was really the sentiment of the board. However, it is my desire that as we move forward, that the board no longer allows for this gray area to, if we as a board feel like school resource officers make our buildings safer and that the end goal should be how we restructure our contractual relationship with them, then we need to be definitive in saying that and deal with the consequences as they may come to us. However, this process began in June, and we've had 6 months now to do many of the things that we're proposing that we begin to do tonight. Maybe the current culture of COVID has bought us a little bit of time regarding the opening of our buildings, but it does not necessarily buy us time with the timeline of the City of Columbus and its negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. And it is really my goal that if we can definitively say to young people, we believe that our school buildings are safer with school resource officers in them, and that is the direction that this board would like to take. I think it would allow for them to begin working with us on some of the things that I think we all have consensus on. So, more counselors and other resources around safety that we want to begin the discussion. But as you've seen through this entire process, their articulated goal has been no cops in schools. That is what they've said to us from day one. They've been very clear and definitive in that. They have not budged from that being the goal. And so if it's a different approach, then the board needs to say that definitively and deal with the ramifications so that we can literally begin putting solutions in place. Because as long as it is just out there hanging and we're not saying one way or the other what our intentions are, then I believe that we're doing a disservice to these young people, even as I disagree with what their desired end result is. And so it would be my goal that the board would be intentional about what we want to see. It would also be my goal that we are deliberate in bringing in our schoolers, bringing in our teaching staff, our own safety and security staff, not leadership, but staff. And I'm speaking specifically for the buildings where each of us know that there are tremendous challenges regarding safety that existed prior to COVID and will exist once we get back to any type of in-person learning model. I hear from the people who we are expecting to do the things that we want to have done to ensure the safety. I want to hear from the teachers that are still out on leave because they were assaulted by some of the students within some of our buildings, and they have a health crisis in their own home that does not allow them to get back to work. We need to make sure that the entire narrative of this discussion is exposed. That is our job. And while we are providing a safe place for students, we need to provide a safe place for those within our district that know that our buildings are safer with our school resource officers than they are without them. And they need to be able to articulate that in a place where there can be understanding of their input. And we have to be intentional and show leadership in doing that. And so, I'd like to hear more about what reform and restructure of the working group means, what the process for reform and restructure means, who will be taken off the working group, who will be added to the working group. I would like those things in explicit, very public detail given to me so that I can continue to make decisions about how I respond to what we're doing moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that perspective. I'm not sure why you are so confused about where the working group is at this moment. They have completed the tasks that they were given by turning in their summary. We, right now, and how we decide to move forward, are going to talk about the next steps and restructuring, because that is what the recommendations were. Hey, board, the process you put in place was not as effective as you thought it would be. And even though we had voices at the table, some of them were drowned out. And we had a survey, we found a lot of data, and we didn't have time to look at it. And so that's exactly what we're about to do, Board Member Ragland, to move forward with this process. And so you are part of creating that. And so, I know you have ideas, we've talked about it. So, that's what I would like to kind of get us to. We have to move forward. This is a critical issue. This is a critical issue for our entire district. We cannot provide the best education that we want to. We cannot accomplish the portrait. We can't do anything if people in our buildings do not feel safe. That's our students, our staff, and our community, and that is physically safe and mentally safe. And so I think you raised a lot of great points and a lot of things we need to talk about. My goal in setting this process was to create a space where all voices, where all perspectives could come together and we could have a meaningful dialogue about where we should go and what is a safe school, so that we can put plans in place to get there. And we're still on that path, and we still have to be very much on that path, and we're all on it together. And so, Mr. Ragland, you are part of these discussions and decisions about how we are going to reformat this and who's involved. That's exactly what the recommendations were coming from the working group. And that's what we need to get to, including having direct conversation publicly about the relationship with the Columbus Police Department. And so I do not disagree with you. And, I know you have been very vocal and at points critical, which is your own right to be, of where we are and how we've gotten here. But I know that we need to keep going forward, and it's going to take all of us. So I appreciate your comments and your perspective. And I ask that you become part of this instead of demanding that I tell you to do something, that you become part of the solution to get where we need to go as a board member. And that's what we're going to do together. And we've already had great ideas from our colleagues about creating we're going to come in and do a working session and really to take a deep dive into that. I don't even know how many pages of data we got from Battelle. There's a lot more information that we have because of this process than we had before. We did a survey where we asked our staff, and if you looked at that data, it's surprising who in our staff feels unsafe. So there's just a lot more that we know now that we can make real progress and real change on, and we can do it together, and move forward. And so that's the path I would like to be on. I would like to be on that path together so that we can get through this. So I'm going to ask you, Board Member Ragland, to please join us on that path.
President Adair, thank you for the comment. I want to be very clear that I asked you very specifically to be the working group in June. I am not, shirking my responsibility in all of this. This was a process that you set in place. I asked you, for not just me, but for other board members, to be a part of the working group to begin with. It was your decision to not include the board back then. And so asking me to be a part of the process now, I've asked to be a part of the process from day one. Now, unfortunately, maybe my opinion on school resource officers was not the popular narrative in the midst of the national cauldron that we were in June. And I understand all of that. A lot of what was happening back in June diminished many voices that have a right to give input on this particular topic. I am ready and have been ready. In fact, I asked you specifically to allow me to engage with this so that there could be a safe space for those that we haven't from to this point. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the one thing that I want to make certain that we do is continue to include the young people in this as we work to refine how they respond to being told no. Because a part of why we are here today is because of the responses and the types of responses that we were receiving from the young people during the working group sessions. A lot of what was said and how it was said was in a manner that we don't feel was necessarily appropriate. That to me is a learning opportunity. How they should respond to being told that they're not necessarily going to get their way is something that we have a duty to teach them. And this is an opportunity to do that. For me, and I read the recommendations to you, the restructuring and the reforming implies that we're going to take out those voices that we did not want to hear from and put in other voices. And as long as we're very clear in saying that that will not be the case, you won't have a problem with me. Yes, we'll disagree.
That it will not be the case. It was never the case. And in fact, part of the work that group did was to figure out how to better engage those voices in a more constructive manner. And that's exactly what we need to do. And, because of the way that the committee worked, as you've identified, other voices were not brought to the table. And so that's what we're going to work on going forward. And so, let's just keep moving forward. We have to, or else we fail all of our students and our whole community. So at this point, are there additional comments from individuals we haven't heard? Because I think that we have come to some, I'm gonna ask you, board members, it sounds like we've come to some maybe consensus already, but I'll ask for a formal, I don't know if we need a vote, but a formal agreement on this, that it sounds like we would like to hold a work session to take a deep dive into this, to look at the information that the work group got together, including all the Battelle data. And we will talk about things around creating a safety agenda, a relationship with our sister government, including Columbus Police. And we will talk about how we continue this work going forward in a more strategic and embedded way to really change the true culture and climate of our buildings in our district. Those are the three main things that I think I heard from all of you going forward. And I would like to set that working session if we can. And I know it's right before Thanksgiving, but next Tuesday. And if, oh, Michael Cole says it doesn't work for him. So we will set it as soon as possible. I need everyone to be able to be available. So if not next Tuesday, then I believe the next day that's available will be we could probably do it on the 3rd. I don't think there's a strategic plan meeting that day. So maybe December 3rd. Please check your calendars. I would like to do it in the next few weeks. Okay, thumbs up. It seems that December 3rd is working. We will double check with Dr. Pierce is still looking, and Vice President Reyes, I think, is not. But we will find a date in the next 2 weeks that works for everyone, and we will set that as an agenda. I would like to ask for a few volunteers and to kind of help take a pre-dive into this if we can, to kind of help guide the agenda and the work of the board, because there is a lot here, and have you kind of lead the meeting if that would be okay. And I think that I'm going to ask Board Member Beckerly, Dr. Pierce, and Board Member Ragland if you all would be interested in kind of pre-meeting, really get our agenda tight for this. I gave the 3 big ideas, but you can kind of help us dig deeper about what we need to do and kind of help us get it going, because we do have a lot to get going pretty quickly. So if you're all shaking your heads, it looks like that is okay. And it looks like at this time, December 3rd might be it, but we will double check that and then publicly notice that as required. And then we will have a very deep dive into that conversation. And I project that we will probably have multiple working sessions on that, because I'm sure we will not spend, it will take probably more than a regular 2-hour working session. All right, thank you, board members, for that discussion and next steps. The next item on the agenda is item 9.2. This is a resolution to endorse the Fair School Funding Plan and to encourage the 133rd General Assembly to expedite the consideration of legislation enacting the same. I'm going to actually have our treasurer and Dr. Roush, our government affairs liaison, to go ahead and make a short presentation about this before we offer a vote.
Thank you very much, President Adair. I'll make a few, give a little bit of background here. Since its inception 6 years ago in House Bill 153 of the 130th General Assembly, the current school funding models operated on a series of varying caps and guarantees. The basis for its cost components appear to be based upon arbitrary dollar amounts or conversion of existing factors into dollar amounts. It's a confusing construct, and as amended 2 years ago by House Bill 49, remains less a funding formula and more a resource allocation model, to borrow a turn of phrase from Treasurer Bahorik. The current biennial appropriations bill retains this allocation model and freezes its components, caps, and guarantees at the fiscal year 2019 levels, eroding its application as a viable formula. Additionally, the current pandemic led the state to further reduce our allocation of funds in the waning months of the last fiscal year, carrying the reduction into the current year and likely setting the new base for funding should the status quo remain intact. After 3 years of stakeholder group meetings led by superintendents and treasurers at the behest of Representatives Cupp and Patterson, the Ohio Fair School Funding Plan was put forth. Initially introduced as House Bill 305 with a companion bill introduced a few weeks ago in the Senate, debate on the future of school funding in Ohio and the implementation of meaningful reforms is well underway. I spent some time with you going over the what and the how of the formula, and while certainly important, you asked the equally important question: why? Why should we support the Ohio Fair School Funding Plan? In looking forward, our position is that the funding mechanism offered through the Ohio Fair School Funding Plan is sound. Our rationale, our why, is as follows. The formula is more understandable than the current funding model. The formula's components are logical and evidence-based, with figures being derived from actual experience and costs. It is not overly prescriptive. While some components, such as career technical education and disadvantaged people impact aid, which is designed to provide resources for those who are economically disadvantaged, do have limitations upon how the funding is spent, the formula generally provides maximum flexibility for local districts to meet the specific needs of their students, families, and communities. The plan removes deductions for community schools, charter schools, as most folks know them as, and scholarships or vouchers from the formula and separately funds those items within the state budget. This should eliminate the penalty imposed on districts on the cap in the current formula. And unlike the current allocation model, which perpetuates the existence of caps and guarantees ad infinitum, the language included in House Bill 305 uses a phased-in approach, stating that the intent of the General Assembly is to achieve full formula funding for all school districts within 6 years. The Columbus City Schools Board of Education has stated on more than one occasion its position that the state of Ohio must identify a funding system that meets the mandate of the Ohio Constitution. In fact, the legislative priorities adopted by this board are reflected in the various concepts you see in the language of the legislation. The perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. The current funding allocation model, some of which is preserved in House Bill 166, is unworkable and untenable. We believe that the Ohio Fair School Funding Plan will provide a basis for education funding in the near and long term, forming the foundation for determining the state's share in our funding partnership. It is for these reasons that we respectfully request that the board adopt the resolution. And I will allow the treasurer to certainly add to any comments that I made. Mr. Bajorek?
And thank you. Several key points. Number one, you heard in Dr. Rush's comments the phrase "looking forward." For so many years in the past, we have had many reasons and complaints about the state funding mechanism. Call it a formula if you like, but we've had complaints about that in terms of not being understandable, not being clear, and most importantly, not being fair and adequate funding. We are faced now with the opportunity and perhaps challenge to put into place the mechanism. Yes, we've seen simulations on the numbers, but how this works itself out and the actual dollars generated will be a function of the next biennial budget discussion and the next one after that and the next one after that. But what we need is a sound foundation upon which we can build and rely upon a mechanism that determines what our state funding is. Eric pointed out really some excellent points for us. The elimination of deductions. I mean, how many times have I done presentations on the unfair impact that has on us because we were on a cap? It strives to eliminate caps and guarantees, albeit we are going to be phased in. But this is our pathway out. This is our pathway to the future of state funding for schools. Rest assured, I did not jump on the bandwagon early on. Rest assured that when Eric and I, somewhat uninvited, showed up at these committee meetings, and they knew that I guess you could say the elephant walked into the living room. They knew when they paused for questions, they would cringe when I would raise my hand and discuss the impact for children in poverty, the impact of caps and eliminating that, the impact of unfair funding school district to school district, the irrationality of all of it. And I took my colleagues to task, many of whom, quite frankly, are much smarter than I am. You need to spend a little bit of time talking to Mike Sobel, and it'll make your head spin. But at the end of the day, I came to the realization and have talked to Dr. Dixon about it and in our briefings with you, that it is imperative that the formula be put into place. And then we can begin to work on funding. And I think another, I don't know how to put this, really, other than just saying the vernacular, really cool feature of this, when we go to the State House under the old formulas and mechanisms, we were, by virtue of the caps and guarantees and the formula, pitted one school district against another. We did not have a unified position to argue from. This common formula that doesn't differentiate us based upon arbitrary criteria allows us to band together with the 609 other school districts in the state and argue for a fair share of the state budget pie. And so I know I've seen the simulations. You've seen them out there. The first run is that Columbus schools would get the largest increase of anyone. Of course, we are the largest school district. And you think, well, $142 million. Yes, that's what the simulation shows. That's only if it's fully funded. And that's only after we make this long, hard fight, quite frankly, to get that formula funded. But the first step is to have a sound, understandable, clear formula in place from which all school districts in the state can work from. And that's what has really got me fired up about asking you to pass this resolution. And I'm prepared. I was watching the news tonight that whether or not the State House and the committee meetings are COVID safe, I'll don my mask and my shield that my wife has bought me, and I will head down there to testify in favor of this bill. Thank you, President Adair.
Thank you both so much for your work and advocacy. We do have a few comments. We will start with Board Member Ragland and then head to Dr. Pierce.
Thank you very much. First and foremost to Mr. Pahoric and Dr. Roush, as well as our board liaison, Misty Nichols, for giving us some background information on this and really getting us up to snuff on what it is that we're looking at today. I also want to publicly thank the bill's sponsors. This has been a lot of work that's been done over a long period of time, and to get to this point is really remarkable. I'm supportive of the resolution tonight. I do have a question though. Why are we using teacher data from fiscal year 2018? Is that just the baseline of where we started, or is there an opportunity by the time that this thing actually gets to passage that we would be incorporating more up-to-date teacher data? I guess that's to either Dr. Roush or you, Stan.
My understanding is we're using, we've been working on this, the committee's been working on it for 3 years. So they've used the current data that they have at hand. My understanding is that once this formula would go into effect, recent data, the most recent data that's available would be used in the calculation. So the answer to your question, I believe, is yes, we would use recent data, and it would be updated at least on a biennial budget basis to coincide with the state budgets. Am I anywhere near to being close, Eric?
In addition, and you are correct. In addition to that, you have a committee or a panel is created within the legislation that actually will look at the components and the various factors and data points that go within that on a fairly, at least a biennial basis, to make sure that we're updating the data to make sure the components are correct. There's also a number of study committees that are contained within this particular piece of legislation. We know that a number of these factors haven't been touched or looked at in some cases almost 20 years. And in other cases are using readily available data rather than perhaps what the actual accurate and complete data should be. So I think that you're going to certainly see some updates in a number of areas within this funding formula, both by virtue of the panel that's already incorporated in it, in addition to the other language that will require the use of the updated data, and then finally those studies that are also incorporated as part of the legislation.
Thank you for that. And my last question would be around how the legislation, how would you expect the legislation to deal with cost of living moving forward? Understanding that those challenges may, go up or down. How would we address that? Is there a way that we can start talking about it?
I think that, again, the key is to get these components in place and get the formula in place. Once you get the parts and pieces there, haggling over which year's data to use or whether we're using a mean or a median, I think those are discussions that we'll have to tackle each discrete biennium. I think that the most important thing to do, first of all, is to get the formula in place. If we continue to kind of worry about the things on the fringe, we'll never, I think Stan used a very good analogy. We got to agree that we're going somewhere first before we start talking about, how we're going to get there and where we're going to stay. So I think we need to keep our focus on getting the formula in place, getting those main components put into place, and then worrying at that point about the inputs that may accompany that.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, board member. Next will be Dr. Pierce.
So I want to take a moment to, thank our team for bringing this legislation to the board so we can give our support of it, which I hope will be our support. This legislation moves us closer to delivering adequate and equitable levels of funding necessary to provide opportunities for all public school students across the state. As we move forward with this agenda, I would like to challenge our district to take a three-pronged approach that our administrators, of course, led by Superintendent Dr. Dixon and our treasurer, Mr. Borak, continue to advance these conversations with their colleagues at other districts and continue, as you said, Mr. Borak, to give testimony when necessary and needed at the state level to advance this much needed work. On a second level, I hope this will give our board, our district, the confidence to continue to advance this issue. We know that funding for public schools has been an issue since, I was a senior in high school when that case came before our state. And so I hope that this will give us the confidence to continue to advance that conversation. And that three-pronged approach is definitely ensuring that we provide opportunities for not just our administrators, but I think we have a great opportunity to engage our educators and our staff in this work as well, to identify those levels of funding that are necessary to really provide opportunities for our students, ensuring that they're helping to point us to the correct data to collect, the data that should be looked at, the tools that maybe we can bring to the conversation that will highlight the funding that's necessary for all of our public school students to be successful, no matter what additional resources, be it interventions or be it enrichment that our students may need to be successful. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. Board Member Cole, did you have a comment?
I wasn't sure if Ms. Beckerly had something to say. Just very quickly, thank you, Madam President. I think it's super important that we remember the legislative process, and that one is, yes, we want to be able to stick to a formula format, something that does ideally build some sort of base cost that's picked up by the state using that kind of formula. But at the same time, let's continue as we advocate to be mindful that there's a Senate and that this has to pass forward to that. The idea of them landing on the same landing pad is, you know, in my mind, and not to sound cynical, not likely. But if it were, just understanding that there's a legislative process and being patient and passionate about that, I would certainly encourage the administration, my colleagues, to make sure that we're available personally to advocate, to testify. I think more of our elected officials in that space need to hear from us, really, as representatives of the people. They need to hear from us as their peers about where we stand on this matter. So legislative process, stay engaged, but be patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cole. Before I turn it to Board Member Brown for motion and his comment, are there any other comments? Okay, then Board Member Brown, your comment and then a motion, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I am excited about this. And my work in this arena, specifically school finance, goes back to my college days. I spent 16 credit hours of independent study trying to develop a formula for changing the way schools are financed. This has been a problem for many, many years. I worked at it in the early 70s, nearly 50 years ago. And very little has changed over that time. This is the first real attempt by the legislator to develop a process that says, what does it cost to educate a student? And it's based on real data. I think that, you know, during the 50 years, you know, I served 20 as a school board member, and not once during that time did we approach getting a changed formula that does what this one does. And, you know, I strongly support, we went through 4 DeRolf cases. My former colleagues, you know, didn't make it judicially, but I'm very, very pleased and praise both Representative Cupp, my former colleague at the Supreme Court, and Representative John Patterson for leading this effort over the last 3 years. I am excited because this is the closest we've been to getting this right in many, many years. No, it's not perfect and it never will be, but this goes a long way to eliminating some of the problems. So with that, I enthusiastically move that we endorse the Fair School Funding Plan and encourage the General Assembly to expedite consideration of legislation that will enact this plan.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, he moved and Cole second. Yes. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you so much. Get that down to the legislature.
It's on its way
right.
tomorrow morning.
Excellent. All right, we are going to now move into our consent agenda. Our consent agenda consists of items 11.1 to 25.10. Are there any items that any board member would like to remove from consent? Okay, I see none. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on any items in the consent agenda? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Okay. I had a note earlier about your vote, Dr. Pierce.
Okay, yes, that's very true. I apologize. So that has become 14.1, correct? So with
Yes, ma'am.
the exception of 14.1, which I'm abstaining from, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you so much. We will now move into board announcements. Any member have an announcement that they would like to make? I see Board Member Ragland and then Board Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam President. Shout out to Coach Maddox and the entire Walnut Ridge High School family. The Walnut Ridge Scots won the first ever Columbus City Schools football playoff championship over the weekend. Hats off to the team at Columbus Eastmore and everything that they did. It was a wonderful, wonderful game. A well-fought game from both teams. A lot of really good sportsmanship was on display Saturday over at Afrocentric. And shout out to the team, the safety and security team that was there, the entire Afrocentric family for putting on what I felt was a wonderful example of Columbus City League athletics. But shout out to the Scots. I've got several that live right here in my community. I'm not going to start naming you all, but you all know I am very, very proud of you and what you are able to accomplish, not only on the gridiron, but also in the classroom. And so thank you very much for your hard work over what has been a tumultuous summer and fall sports season for all of our student athletes with the culminating event on Saturday. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And Board Member Brown?
Thank you. Just a couple of things briefly. First, excuse me. I just want to extend my additional praise to our staff throughout Columbus City Schools, top to bottom, administrators, our teachers, our bus drivers, our workers. We've accomplished a great deal over the last 7 months, despite COVID-19 and despite the circumstances. And I know that it has taken a lot of hours and a lot of very hard work, but you know, in my view, our staff has been excellent and focused and has gotten a lot of good things done. So thank you all. Secondly, I wanted to mention the Franklin County Commissioners this morning took another commendable step with respect to racial equity. They were the leaders in this state, at least, and probably nationwide, in calling race as a public health issue. And it is. But they have now taken another step that I think deserves praise. And what they've done is established racial equity as a core principle of governance. Now, they're organized a little bit differently than us, but they have a series of several statements that are listed as their fundamental principles, with acknowledgement that race plays a part in almost every single aspect of our daily lives. And they've decided to meet those challenges head on, as we have, that we must promote racial equity, inclusion, and diversity in everything we do. I have a copy of the resolution and the information that they've just this morning passed. And I'd like to see us take a look at how we can go even farther than we have, that this is not only a public health issue, and it clearly is, but that racism is something that is fundamental. It is one of our core principles, drive that out. And with a step like the county took, we may be able to do that. Now, I don't think for an instant that passing another resolution gets it done. We must continue to work on this issue and make real progress. That's where the most important part comes in. But for this board to take even further action to demonstrate to our staff and to everybody who deals with us that we take this seriously, that this is important to us, I think makes a lot of sense. So I'll pass this along, and we should take a look at it and consider doing something more with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent words. And you know, I know that we are all excited that Dr. Blue is here and really going to start to lead us through. And I think, you know, as we start to go through the strategic plan, we're going to have her be more part of board meetings, and we'll see her more. I know she's working right now, getting ready, and but we're going to actually see her and start to really highlight that work. So thank you for bringing that important, you know, thing. I think it's also really great to be part of a community that is really bringing this to the forefront together and holistically, because the truth is none of us can change our own system without the change of the full government system. So so it is exciting that, you know, our sister government, you know, it does feel that we as a community are entering the same page and will be working together. So that's exciting. So thank you for bringing that up. And thank you, county commissioners, for that work. Dr. Pierce.
So I just want to take a second to congratulate our students and our staff. Over the weekend, I had the pleasure of attending an honor roll drive-through at Briggs High School, and to see the excitement, to see parents showing up to get their students awards, even when their students were out playing basketball games. It just warmed my heart so much. So I want to give a big, huge congratulations. We're so proud of you, to all of our honor roll students that are at Briggs High School, but I want to extend that district-wide to all of our high school students, our middle school students, our elementaries, our pre-Kers, because you're acing everything. Pre-Kers are absolutely awesome. So I want to say, great work. We're so very proud of you all at a time when there's Zoom fatigue and you want to see your peers. Like this, being on the computer for 6 to 8 hours every day is getting old. You all are continuing to grind and be successful. We see that, we recognize you, we acknowledge and appreciate your hard work in the classroom. To our teachers as well that are making all those assignments, seeing students in office hours, you know, spending a little extra time with them after class to ensure that our students are successful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To our families, we know that our students are not successful alone. It's a family effort. So to those parents, those caregivers that are staying up until midnight, that are on our digital learning systems and going through and lining out what their students have to do the next day when they turn on their computers, that are organizing those passwords for them. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that support. It's a team effort. We can't do it alone. We can't wait until we go back into the classrooms and we're able to provide you with that much needed relaxation moment, that rest period that you'll get to have when we have the students back into the classroom. But again, just want to thank you all so much for supporting our students. To our students that may not have made honor roll, Continue to work hard. Continue to work hard. It will happen for you. You'll get on honor roll, because I know deep down in my heart, all of our students are extremely smart and capable of making honor roll and doing well and being successful. So to those students who may not have made honor roll this first quarter, continue to work hard. The success will pay off. Continue to reach out to your teachers to get that additional help, and reach out to your peers for that help. We support you. We're behind you, and we're acknowledging all the great things that you all are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Any additional comments, announcements? All right, seeing none then, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Was that Ms. Beckerly that moved to adjourn? I couldn't read your lips from here. Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes, sir.
That motion carried.
Thank you so much. We are done for the evening, and we look forward to seeing you all later. Thank you and have a great holiday.